Can I say hi? Oh. He's like, I do not like it. Hi. You scratching at the door? Yeah. Don't know why you're down here in the basement. Very confused. Can you say hi? This is not Misty. Wait, no, this is Misty. This is not Pepper. But this is one of my other fluffy babies who is not usually down here with me. Okay, bye bye. She did not want to say hello. Ooh, woof, y'all. It's been a rough start to 2025, both for me personally and for like the world that we live in. So there's been a bit of a gap since the last time I posted a video, and I'm sorry for that. I have actually been keeping up with my projects for the most part. I have footage and finished products for 3 more videos, and well, including this one, so 2 more after this. I just haven't been able to edit and get them uploaded in any kind of manageable time frame because I'm exhausted from, the existential angst that surrounds us on a daily basis lately. Um, but anyway, I had some free time to kill because my car got stolen, and I had to stay home from work today to deal with some insurance company stuff. And so now I've got a few extra minutes to actually sit down and record this intro and get this video uploaded. So, you know, making lemonade out of lemons, I guess. Anyway, this project was my McGonagall costume. It was McGonagall's velvet robe that she wears in, at least the first couple Harry Potter movies. And it turned out pretty well, I think. So I'm excited for you guys to see it. I'm excited for you to see the whole process. And yeah, let's get going. All right, so we're starting off here with the inspiration for the outfit. As you can see, I'm trying a different method than my last video of showing you what my inspiration was. So we're gonna see how this goes, how we like this. So here's my very bad attempt at scrapbooking. I am not a scrapbooker, but you know what? We're gonna make it work. These are a couple pictures of McGonagall's robe. So a picture of the legendary woman herself up there in the right corner, and then 2 pictures of what I believe is actually an action figure that is sold of her. Um, I'm just writing out some key details that I'm pulling out from these inspiration photos so you can see, it's a full floor length robe. It actually billows out just a little bit, but not, it doesn't really have a train. Like it's all the same length. It's just a little bit longer than she is tall. It's very gathered across the back yoke, has big ol' sleeves, as I just wrote for you there. Let's see what else I'm gonna write. I don't even remember. It's been so long since I filmed this. I think I'm just thinking to myself right now, wondering what I'm gonna write next. Oh, I've made a decision. Okay. What am I writing? Let's see. I have no idea where I'm going with this. The suspense is killing me. Front panel. What did I mean by that? I think I probably meant that this is a princess seam-ish along the front, and that there's like a separate front panel and it's not darted. I think that's what I meant by that. All right, I've had another thought here. What am I thinking now? Sleeves. Lined. Ah, yes, the sleeve lining, you can see in the top photo, is actually a very deep burgundy color. So I have a really lovely burgundy rayon that I thrifted that I'm going to be lining this green silk velvet with today. And then here I'm highlighting the back yoke, which is actually kind of a starish shape. You can't really see it in this photo. I'm not sure that I love this method, uh, other than the, suspense that it's giving you as I try to remember things. But it's a vaguely star-shaped back yoke that the rest of it is then gathered into across the back. Still waiting to see what I'm gonna write next. Man, I was really indecisive this day. Do, do, do. Draw another arrow to something. Ah, brooch. Yes, so she's wearing an interesting brooch at her throat here. I briefly debated trying to make it myself, and then I ended up buying one on the internet. So that's where that goes. And the black turtleneck dress underneath. It's a long-sleeved black turtleneck dress, which I will also make in this video. That'll be up top. I'll make the black turtleneck first, and then I will make the robe itself. All right, let's see here. Oh, here we go. What's the next thing? Man, this is really fascinating for me. Um, Pointed sleeves. Yes, the dress underneath has points at the sleeves that kind of point towards the middle finger. The dress that I make does in fact have that, although you won't really be able to see it, I don't think. But trust me when I say it's there. All right, y'all, I have to correct myself now. I said in the previous bit that you were going to see me make both the robe and the turtleneck dress. That's actually a lie. It turns out the turtleneck dress was really boring to watch because it is just a basic pattern. Like it's just the basic blocks, my basic bodice block and my basic A-line skirt block that I cut out in black fabric and sewed together. So it's really boring and I don't want to waste your time with it. It also, this video is set to be like an hour long with that included. So we're skipping straight to the robe, and as you can see, what I've done so far here is I have traced out my basic block, the front of my basic block, turned it into a V-neck, and then I've squared it off a little bit because I'm not going to do an inset sleeve for this. I'm going to do a squared off sleeve. You'll see what I mean by that later. So I've squared the pattern off. I'm just gonna ignore that bottom dart. That's why you see X's through that. We're just gonna pretend it's not even there, because robe is supposed to be pretty like loose anyway and not terribly fitted. But I am going to move this top dart all the way over to the top of the shoulder seam, or the top of the arm side, and then I'm going to turn that into a style line. So it's kind of a princess seam. It's not a full princess seam. Wow, that was a really bad cut on that video that I just did there. But basically, what you see now is I'm uh, getting the line for the new arm side when that seam is sewn back together. There's no point in filling it because I'm just going to cut it apart again. So now you can see where I am cutting across the front panel and the side panel of the top. Um, there we go. See? And now I'm thinking really, really hard because this was not necessarily going the way I thought it was going to, and then I decided that that's fine. What am I doing here? Oh, I think I was gonna even off the. That's what I was gonna do. I'm squaring it off. I'm squaring this off a little bit more. That's what I'm doing. And then I'll have to cut the line back in for the princess seam. I really should record the audio for these closer to the time of when I actually do the project so that I'm not, constantly amazed by what I'm doing on film. That's that's a goal. That's almost certainly never going to happen. You're probably always going to hear me be surprised by things. Take yourself as you are, you know what I mean? Anyway, now I'm adding half-inch seam allowance to both of the front pattern pieces. There's Pepper down there off to the side, cleaning herself like a cutie pie. Oh, I forgot I'd done this. Good job, self. So right here, what you see me doing is I'm rounding off the tip of that, and then because you rounded off the tip, you actually added very slightly more length to the piece. And so I'm going to add that very slightly more length back into the other side to make sure that it still lines up correctly when you sew it together. I don't actually do this most of the time when I do a princess seam, so I'm impressed with myself that I did it here on a garment that is not even particularly fitted and where it doesn't really matter. But anyway, on to the back. So now we've got the back of the bodice, drawing in my dart. There I'm matching up the side so that I know that my side seams will match. And squaring off my shoulder seam as well. Make sure that that matches. All right. So this is my very square back of bodice. And now I'm going to create the shape of the yoke. And this is really the only time you're actually going to be able to see this, because once it's all sewn together in a dark green velvet, it is actually pretty hard to see unless you're looking very closely for it. So I'm just kind of guesstimating based off of an image about where I want this yoke to be, and then drawing it in. It's a bit of a swoopy back yoke there that you then gather everything down to fit. So then I will separate the yoke and I will add seam allowance to both pattern pieces. Actually, well, I will add seam allowance to the yoke, or to both pattern pieces in a minute, because first I have to add the extra volume that will be gathered down into the yoke. So we're going to label that. Look at me being so good. And then now I'm going to add some extra volume to this piece. And I add it in two separate places, even though in retrospect I could have just put it all in one spot. Doesn't actually matter. But at the time, for some reason, I had myself convinced that it needed to be added in two separate spots, and I'm not entirely sure why. Um, but I add it there. I cut between those two. Add, I think, 2 inches there, and then also add 2 inches um, to the center back. At least I'm pretty sure that's what I do. We're gonna find out together, shall we? Wow, I am just a straight up liar. I just added 3 inches right there, which is not the 4 inches total I just told you. Trying to make sure everything's even still. All right, so apparently I added 3 inches right there through the center of that back piece. I'm just trying to be so good here, trying to make sure everything stays nice and even. Don't need that extra paper, save that for another project. This was frankly unnecessary because again, it's all just going to be gathered down. So could have just done it as a straight line. Do as I say, not as I do, because I often make things more complicated for myself than I need to. Yep, see, I ended up just evening that off anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Taping all my floops down to make sure it doesn't get caught on things. Oh, look at that. I did add some to the center as well. Fascinating. Well, I guess we're going to go on a journey together to find out how much width I added into the center back. So keep in mind this is only half of the back pattern. So I've added 3 inches, which once it's duplicated on the other side will be an additional 6 inches. And then now I'm adding 1 more inch. So I did have 4 inches total that I added. I just added it slightly differently than I thought I did. So total of 8 extra inches added once everything is cut out that then gets gathered down into the yoke. And I am actually not going to add seam allowance down the center because I'm going to cut it on the fold. And now that I have done that, I will go back in and add seam allowance to the rest of that line where the yoke is attached, and then I will add a seam allowance to the yoke. And now we are going to work on the bottom part of the robe, which I did end up cutting these all out as long pieces. So I connected the portion that I drafted at the top to the portion that I drafted at the bottom. Um, then I had to do some quick math for myself because I realized that um, my pattern had been split, or my bodice pattern was split, was princess seamed, and so that meant that I needed to find the same line on my A-line skirt block, which then I realized didn't actually matter because I'm just gonna make it a big old square anyway that comes down and matches with the top. So realistically, I don't even think I needed the A-line skirt block because it's just gonna be a big giant rectangle at the end of the day. Although apparently I did actually bring this out into fascinating. Tony, why do you make your life so difficult when this could have just been a giant? I guess I wanted more volume. I guess that was what it was. Is I wanted this to have more volume in the bottom than it did at the top. So okay, that actually makes sense. I'm gonna. All right, pass Tony. You weren't crazy. So I did keep the A-line skirt um, pattern going the whole way down, so that I would have much voluminousness on the bottom half. This is me figuring out how long I wanted it. I believe I took this to 45 inches, I think. Possibly 50. I couldn't quite tell looking at that tape measure. I guess I could zoom in and find out. But I'm not going to. Ah, hey, look. It is 45 inches. I marked it once it was fully 45 inches. I can't remember if I took the back longer or if I left it all the same length. I guess we'll find out here in a moment when I draft the back. You and me together, we're going to learn so much about what the me of 3 months ago did. Might even be 4 months ago at this point. Because I filmed this. Yeah, I think I filmed this in December, so I think this was 4 months ago. Oof. Time flies when the world is ending. Alright, this is me just marking down the whole length of my hem, so 45 inches the whole way across to the side seam. Well, not side seam, the set mid front seam. It's not the center seam because this is the side piece. We haven't actually connected this to the front yet, to the panel on the front. I don't know, to the seam line. And there we go. Really good job editing, Tony. Not cutting out this really boring footage of nothing. Ah, okay, so this is, I was drawing in the seam allowances so that I could overlap them correctly and get the bodice connected to the skirt to make it all one piece because I don't want there to be a seam at the waist. And then just kind of rounding off that curve a little bit so that it's not quite so stark. And then taping down my floop across the back. And moving on to probably the center front. Let's find out. Ah, you can see at this point I have had to switch papers as well because I ran out of my actual pattern paper and could not get any more in an expedited fashion. And so now I have resorted to leftover Christmas wrapping paper to finish this off. Oh, actually, and this is what we're doing here is not even part of the rest of the skirt. I guess I just didn't. I may not have recorded filming the rest. Let's find. We'll find out. We'll find out together. I may not have recorded drafting the rest of the skirt because this is definitely the sleeve that I'm drafting here. So the sleeve is just going to, like, with a straight stitch be attached to the, well, everything's with a straight stitch, but in a straight line be attached to the uh, robe before the side seams are sewn together, so it's not an inset sleeve. But that means that the side of the sleeve there is just a straight line, and then I'm going to figure out how long I want it to be, which is the measurement at the top of the screen is sort of the length. And then now you can see that I'm just sketching in roughly the curve of the sleeve. So if let me say this more clearly. So there's a line that's off camera down at the bottom, and that line is the arm side. It's where it will attach to the rest of the robe. I am sketching the opening, the curved opening of the sleeve here, all the way down to the bottom of the sleeve. So the full length of the sleeve from the, top if you're holding your arm out to the floor is at the top, and then the length in between on the left-hand side of the screen, that's just my arm length. So that takes the sleeve basically down to just past my wrist. Because these sleeves actually don't overhang McGonagall's hands. You can see her hands. And so it's just down to just past the top of my wrist. All right, so here are my pattern pieces all laid out on the lining fabric. Um, just for me to get a sense of, what I'm working with. And here, this is just a really pretty aesthetic shot of me ironing some of the lining, mostly so you can get a good sense of the color of it, because I just thought it was one of the prettiest colors I've ever seen in a just, rayon fabric. And I got it from a thrift shop. I got a ton of it from a thrift shop. It's a really good find. Anyway, so now we're back to the back of the robe. This is the back of the robe cut out in the green velvet fabric. And this is me gathering it down. Wow, I am so good at this, guys. I just put my shoulder directly in front of the camera. All right, so I've gathered the back down and attached it to the yoke. And now I am sewing those two pieces together. Um, really clunkily. Yep, there we go. Good job, self. So now, and yes, I am just sewing over my pins here because it turns out this velvet fabric is very, very slippery, and sewing over my pins was the only way that I could get it to work for me. So come at me for it, but you know what? I wear glasses, so if my needle ever breaks and hits me, comes hurtling at me, at least I've got some built-in eye protection. Um, Realistically, you're going to see me do this a lot on this channel because I tend to work with a lot of very slippery fabrics, and I get the very tiny little pins, the very thin pins, to try to minimize my risk. Um, so now I am stitching up the sides of the yoke here. I've sewed a little too close to the edge, so it didn't want to work with me fully. I've since learned the error of my ways on this to be able to get this kind of a corner without ending up with some clunkiness. But we're gonna give past Tony some grace, and present. We're gonna give all versions of Tony some grace, because the world is terrible. So anyway, attaching the rest of the back yoke to the back panel of the fabric, and this is really the only thing I had to do for the back of this robe. Um, it was pretty straightforward. It's just make a yoke, add some gathering, attach yoke to gathered section, and that's it. That's the end of the back of the robe. So here you can see the back of the robe gathered down and attached to the yoke. Now we're going to take a cat break. Look at that sweet baby. She's such a good baby, making biscuits. Little Lickles. Oh, I just love her so much. What a sweet little thing. All right, bye, Pepper. All right, back to this is the front of the robe now, and I am marking where um, my notches are so that I can connect these not princess seams in the right spots. So I'm just using pins to mark my notches on the fabric. I'll do the same thing on the other panel piece, and then I will line them up and get them pinned together, and then I will sew down that line. Pin, 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 pin. Pinning about one pin every inch or so as I go down this because, again, slippery fabric means lots of pins. Now we have this super speed shot of me putting so many pins into this, getting to the bottom and realizing that my pieces don't completely line up. And then deciding I don't care and I'll figure that out later. Hey, look, another cinematic shot of me pressing a seam allowance because, why not? Why not have some fun in there? You can see I've clipped that seam allowance. All right, so I did that on both the sides of the front. And then I sewed, say off camera, I guess, I sewed the front and back pieces together at the shoulder seams. So now what you're seeing me do is attach the sleeve to the robe itself. So I'm pinning the sort of side seam of the robe to the arm side of the sleeve. All of this is done flat. And then I will sew that down and flip the sleeve over, and then I will sew the side seam of the robe and the underarm of the sleeve simultaneously. So you'll see that here in a minute, in theory. For now, enjoy this great view of my shoulder and the back brace that I have had to start wearing while sewing so that my neck does not get absolutely wrecked. All right. So now we are back at the table, and I'm going to pin the underarm of the sleeve, so the underarm seam of the sleeve, we'll pin it the whole way down, and then we will pin down the side seam of the robe itself, and we will sew all the way from the corner of the sleeve up and pivoting around that underarm and then down the side seam, and I'm not going to show you any of that on camera. I'm just going to show me fiddling with this fabric until I eventually start getting it pinned. And then I don't even think I show the entire, yeah, I think I just show a piece of the pinning process, and then all of a sudden, hey, well, bam, everything, all of that's done, and now I'm here with this random square that I didn't explain at all prior to this. So essentially, I finished the robe, finished the lining, and then decided that a competent witch like Minerva McGonagall would not be caught dead wearing a robe that didn't have a custom inner pocket for her wand. So I am adding a welt pocket to the lining of the robe in order to slip my wand in and out. So all I'm doing here is sort of setting up my box for where my welt is going to be. I have cut out sort of this long square pocket and then put interfacing on both the welt portion, like the pocket portion, and the lining itself. And then I will sew those together. I will sew around that box, as I just showed you. And then I will come back and I will very, very carefully cut through the interfacing in the fabric, and I will flip the whole thing to the other side. And then you just shove it through that hole you made. Then you panic for a second, and then you keep going. Get it the whole way through. So I ended up realizing here that I actually just hadn't cut uh like I hadn't cut it well enough. Anyway, I got it cut, I got it flipped through, I got it ironed down. And then you come back in, you fold up this little piece. That'll be sort of what's visible from the front side. Stitch down your little sections. And then, what do I do next? What do you do next? Do I just flip it up? Yep, just flip it up at that point. Flip it up, stitch the whole pocket together, being careful not to stitch it sort of to the lining itself. Um, and then you've got yourself a cute little pocket at the end of this. And by cute, I mean functional. Get yourself a functional little pocket once you've sewn all that together. So there you go. There's the pocket from the inside. There's the pocket from the outside. Can little pocket. And then this is just the lining of the robe, so you can see how functional the pocket is. All right, on that note, we're on to the final product. And that's it. That's the McGonagall robe. It went pretty well. I actually was pretty pleased with how it turned out. It was very voluminous and flowy. Um, There are a few things that I think I could have done better just on the sewing itself. So for example, um, I did not reinforce, I didn't put an interfacing in the very front panels of the robe at all, and I wish I had done that. At the time I didn't because it is just like a sort of velvet robe that's supposed to be very loose and flowy, so I didn't want to disrupt the flow of it by adding any structure. But in retrospect, I wish I had added some structure just to right in here to keep the crease a little bit more visible and to keep it from kind of like flopping open as much because it doesn't have a clasp closure or anything like that. So I think an interfacing could have done a lot to help with it there. Trying to think. I feel like I know I had other things that again this all happened so long ago at this point. That was the main thing was I wish I'd interfaced it better. I wish I mean, the material was just really hard to work with. And I think now, having made something this large out of such a tough material, I could probably do a better job with it just purely from experience. And that's the name of the game. That's what sewing is you're gonna learn every time you make something, and then you can apply those skills the next time you make something. Um, so I do think already that I've gotten better in some of the projects you'll see coming up. I've worked a little better with the fabric. I should have interfaced, actually, I should have interfaced the back yoke as well. That's the other spot I should have interfaced so that it held its structure more and like kept the shape that I had intended for it more. So that's really the big thing is that even though it was a flowy garment, I wish I'd added a bit more structure to it in certain spots. But that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I had a really good time making it, and let me know what you think.